and welcome to another Sparkenation conversation. My special guest today is David Deane-spread. And David and I think we've known each other for at least 25 years. David, that would be about...
That's pretty
right?
close.
Pretty
close. I'm scared to be accurate.
Indeed. And we've had a number of fascinating conversations over the years about leadership. And so it's most appropriate that our topic today, the consistent truth about leadership, is what we're going to explore. David is sometimes referred to as the difficult people specialist. And I find that an interesting description of you, David, but I know you say yourself that remember, difficult people don't mean to be difficult. There's always a reason.
Absolutely. There is always a reason for somebody's being difficult as perceived by other people, of course.
And we may explore that this afternoon, but
sure.
David has an interesting background, which he may tell you about as we go, but he was once involved in some very covert operations, including Catherine trying to blow up something in Adelaide, if I recall correctly, David.
Oh.
Actually, it wasn't in Adelaide, it was in Ballarat.
That's right. Sorry, my memory. But there you go. So David's been involved in coaching leaders of all kinds for a very long time. And I'm personally looking forward to our conversation this afternoon. I thought the format, just for Jonathan, you haven't joined us before. I think, Catherine, you've been in one of these before.
Yes.
The others know. Our format's really quite simple. It's a conversation.
Yep.
And basically, I'm going to start with a question for David, and then we'll see where it goes.
Excellent.
Feel free to, join in as Simone and Paul and Catherine will, Jonathan. And I'm sure we're in for a fascinating hour and a little bit. We will end 5 o'clock on the dot, thereabouts, anyway. But plenty of time. And so, David, I want to kick off with. There's a lot of talk about leadership. It's almost every day, and the talk pretty much is about the lack of leadership rather than what I would call real leadership. I mean, here in Victoria, the talk is about the president of the Collingwood Football Club's lack of leadership in the last few days, and you might have seen some of that in the press. There's been talk about the lack of leadership by some politicians in relation to the lockdown in Perth, where you and Jonathan are, and the bushfires. There's been talk about the lack of leadership in the bushfires we had here in Victoria at the start of the year, and people still waiting for help.
Yeah.
So the talk seems to be about the lack of real leadership, and so I don't want to start there. I want to start with, where's the talk about real leadership, and the truth about leadership? Where do we find good examples of great leadership rather than the poor examples that tend to bombard us, through the media each day?
Yeah, it's an interesting and a good question. I think it's something to do with the way the media picks up on complaints rather than praise. And I know from just within my client base that there are many examples, overwhelming numbers of good leadership being practiced every day. Not because of me, but because of them, that they're already there. Yes, there are always going to be moments when a good leader will be criticised, and then everyone will say bad leadership, bad leadership. I think
we'll just welcome Sally. We finally got you in the room. So
hey, Sally.
There you go.
Hi there, Sally.
We've just begun, Sally, and the question I asked David was to start the conversation, and feel free to join in whenever you'd like to. The question I asked was, there's a lot of examples of bad leadership. Where do we find examples of good leadership? And David's just been saying that there are in fact good leaders everywhere, and that I think that's true. In fact, there are 7 of us online, not knowing you, Sally, but assuming that you're already a good leader. But I know of Jonathan, and I know personally of Catherine and Paul and Simone. So there's a bunch of good leaders here. where are the rest of them? You're saying they're everywhere, David.
Yeah, everywhere you
How do
go,
we
you'll
shift
find.
the narrative?
It's the same way as how do we shift the media's narrative to stop focusing on what's broken and what's wrong and what's bad, to shifting the narrative to an appreciative inquiry rather than a pathological inquiry. And I think that's one of the things that leaders who are appreciated are really good at. They don't focus on what's broken in order to fix it, which is the pathological approach. They look at what's working, acknowledge it, and then ask the people who are doing that, say, how can we grow that over here? What can we do? What can we learn from what you've done? That's brilliant, and make it work over there. And so it's an appreciative inquiry rather than a pathological inquiry as a mindset.
And we're talking about the David Cooper-Ryder appreciative inquiry, I assume.
Not specifically, which is a facilitation model.
Yeah.
Not specifically that, but the concept, the mindset of appreciating what's working really well and making that and learning from that and growing from it. And what we tend to do, what we see is if we take a pathological approach, which is, I go to the doctor because I'm sick. I do not go to the doctor because I'm in great health, which is, weird in many ways. Why not? Why not? To work out how's that happening? Why is that happening? How do we keep it going? But if we do a pathological inquiry, we get incremental improvement because we're focusing on what's broken, we're trying to fix it. If we focus on an appreciative approach, in other words, what's working really well and how do we make that grow, we get a step change. We get a significant paradigm shift sometimes into new and better territory. And that's a leadership stance that I advocate. I mean, one of the things that ties in with that are the three things. There's only three things that we humans do that causes our problems. And if we understand those three things, which is fear, habits, bad habits, of course, or habits that don't work, and ignorance, they're the three problems of everything that goes wrong with humans on the planet. Every conflict, every error, every misunderstanding, every mistake, whether it be a safety error or dealing with a crisis, an error made there, all caused by fear, habits, and ignorance, any one or all three of them. And if we're looking at cause so that we can actually deal with something, if we're going to go down a pathological inquiry, which sometimes we might need to, then we look for those three things, and then we apply the three remedies. If there's only three causes, that means there's only three remedies as well. And the remedy to fear is courage, is it not?
I would say love, but we're on the same page.
Yeah. Yes. No. Well, absolutely. Because there are only two emotions, love and fear. And every other emotion is on that continuum. And courage is on the love side for sure.
Yeah.
The love of our values and the love of our people and the love of life. And have the courage to do what's needed to protect it and to preserve it. Then we have the remedy for habits that don't work is better practice, because all habits came through practice, whether the habits work or whether the habits don't work. So better practice is the remedy. And the remedy for ignorance, of course, is continuous learning. And so if a leader comes to a situation and does have to face a pathological approach rather than an appreciative approach, look for that root cause, which will be a combination of, or one of, or more of fear, habits, and ignorance, and then apply the remedy. And we get a deep fix and we move forward. And it's quite interesting.
This is a wonderful beginning, David. There's so much richness in what you're saying. It's kind of where do we go from here? And I can see some deep thought on everyone's faces. So maybe there's a question for David out of that, or maybe we should just let David go a bit more.
Can I just ask one, not a question or a query really? I've always understood courage to be the acceptance of fear and how you tackle it.
Yeah.
I mean, is that fair? Because, you know, for someone who's brave doesn't mean they're not fearful. They're just got courage to go on with the issue.
Oh yeah, look, courage doesn't mean the absence of fear.
No.
The soldiers don't get medals for not being scared. They get medals for being scared and doing it anyway, which is
Excellent.
courage.
Good. I just wanted to make sure I was on the right page there. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
What's coming to my mind at the moment is Biden's inauguration speech, and there's only one thing that really stood out for me, and that was when he said, "I will make mistakes, and when I do, I expect you to help me fix them." Yep. I think there's an acknowledgement that great leaders will get it wrong sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a vulnerability element, isn't it?
But by calling it out up front,
yeah,
he's not going in saying, "I believe I'm perfect and I'm going to get it right every time." And I think that's a common failing of some leaders, the expectation that they have to be right all the time.
Yeah, I fully agree. I totally agree. We're only human, and we will err, and it will be out of those one of those three, or a combination of those three reasons: fear, habits, and ignorance. And mainly ignorance if it's a leader. We don't know it. We don't, hopefully, rather than fear, which I'll come to when we start talking about that. One of the core perennials in leadership, which I'd like to come to. But I think it's important to actually get clear what leadership is not. There's a lot of managers are not leaders; they're managers.
Correct.
A lot of strategy thinkers are not leaders; they're strategists. And the subject matter experts aren't necessarily leaders, and nor are people who are popular. They're not necessarily leaders. And so leadership is quite, to me anyway, is very distinctly about a person's ability to effectively influence, inspire, support, and coach people to put in willing effort to achieve a goal. At the same time, aligning with the shared values. In other words, keeping those values intact, not taking shortcuts that breach values to get an end result, but rather using the values and honouring the behaviour that they've agreed to achieve the goal. To me, that's what leadership is about.
Certainly aligns with my definition. In my Heart Leadership book, I say that it's the art of seeing, sometimes unearthing, but mostly magnifying and enhancing people's essence, including your own.
Absolutely. And I think that those are the real parts of leadership, where you're working with people, and sometimes even leading yourself. The rules apply, the same principles apply. And I know that when I started out as a young officer at the age of 20, military officer at the age of 20, I was a second in command of a military prison. And I'd had all the training to be a leader, but I had zero experience. And I really did get thrown in the deep end with a lot of very seasoned veterans who were tough military policemen looking after military criminals. And they're all trained killers, essentially. And it was a very, very rapid learning experience for me.
I can imagine. My first leadership experience came as a 15-year-old out on the cricket field, where the captain got injured and the coach said to me, "You're it, son."
Yep. Deep end.
It's deep end, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was, as like you, I had some training, but never been in on the field, as it were, before, in the arena as the
Yeah, I mean, it's the arena, the training is important. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we face on the planet right now, and why there are so many apparent complaints about the lack of leadership is because a lot of people are put into leadership positions without any training whatsoever. And that's particularly so in politics, where they win by votes. So it's a popularity contest, a personality contest, rather than a leadership selection process. And we see that even at local government in Australia, where we have the 3 tiers of government, we see people grossly unqualified, grossly ill-prepared, and they become councillors on local government. And when you look deeply at what their motive is, it's to commence a career in politics.
Because I think you're absolutely right, David, and that's one of the challenges that we have, is that we have, I think, politicians at all levels who do not understand leadership and have no training or coaching.
No, that's right.
In leadership,
That's right, and it's not necessarily their fault.
No, it's a system. It's a system thing, in my view.
I think Jonathan might have some comments there because of his experience in politics.
Well, yeah, I could wax lyrical on that all day. There are some good leaders within politics, but I was thinking of it in the context of management. A lot of managers are poor leaders, and a lot of leaders aren't in management. And certainly in my experience in commercial life, where I have clearly and demonstrably been a leader, but been precluded from being in management because they couldn't stand the challenge. But back in politics, yeah, there are a few leaders, but yeah, generally they're time servers. They're people who have engineered themselves into positions of influence on the basis of self-service, frankly. Having said that, let's not deny that there are people who do that for the common good, and they are the ones that we should positively laud and search out and make sure that they become our leaders.
I agree with that.
I've got a view that if politicians will come to you, Catherine, I've got a view myself that if politicians were managers, we'd be a lot better off. And
well, some of our best prime ministers haven't been great leaders, but they've been competent managers.
Yeah, and my context is that leadership's about people and management's about process, and we may come to that. Catherine.
Look, most managers are appointed because of their expertise in a certain line, certain industry. I worked in the minerals in the mining industry, so with people who knew their stuff backwards, but as leaders they were hopeless, and unfortunately the staff miss out on career development because their manager just doesn't know how to handle them. They're so busy running their portfolio, and that's great, but there needs to be perhaps some training on how they deal with staff, because there's a lot of disgruntled staff out there who are going nowhere in a career, and it comes down to this management leadership. There is no leadership, and that's so unfortunate, especially if I can say I was in the public service for 15 years. It's very regimented how they manage their staff. So you've got a lot of discontent, and that's such a shame because the amount of expertise is within those agencies. If there was more management or more leadership of the staff, there's going to be a lot more job satisfaction.
So here's the thing: managing people is an oxymoron.
You can't manage people.
I'm going to write that down.
It can't be done. It could never be done. It's a lie. It comes from the Industrial Revolution. We need,
Don't tell the Singapore government that,
Peter,
Ian.
sorry, Paul.
Don't tell the Singapore government that.
Well, this is one of the challenges. Is one of the reasons why Singapore is a successful country is because of its management skills. But imagine if it had good leadership skills, as well. And this is kind of the thing. I mean, I know a handful of people, David, who are both good leaders and good managers. Only a handful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually been,
I don't know too many people who are able to do both.
No, I totally agree.
Most of the good leaders that I know have got good managers on their team.
That's the answer. I mean, I would definitely say that I'm not a good manager. In fact, I know I'm not a good manager. I am a leader, an operational leader, strategic leader sometimes, operational leader sometimes. Leading remote teams is a specialty because of the covert work that I did. When we didn't have the technology we got now, we were in the analog days where I had basically three, apart from my own voice and within hearing range, it was UHF, VHF, radio, and a telex machine. and you're operating as far away from one side of Australia to the other, or in many cases, one part of Asia into another part of Asia, and it was very different.
So is it fair to say, David, can we maybe put a bit of a peg in the ground to say that one of the consistent truths about leadership is that it's not management?
Look, I think that's a great peg to put in the ground. Yes, leadership is not management. It's not strategy. It's not being a subject matter expert, and it's not being popular. That's not leadership. None of that's leadership.
So how do we separate leadership and management? Because I think they're
Very
both
clearly, very clearly, Paul. Leadership is about people. I think Ian's already said this, and management is about process. So you manage processes, you manage resources, you manage measurement, you manage supplies, you manage the systems, the software, you manage all of those components. Leadership is about engaging with the people, doing things maybe the right way in terms of values. It is about supporting people, helping them to be the best they can be, helping them to grow, helping them to stay safe and stay well under pressure, and bringing them along with hope, with an idea of the future and a sense of purpose, a sense of value.
Do you believe they're both important? And
Say
management
again?
and leadership.
Say again?
Are both management and leadership important? Is one more important than the other?
No, they're both important. And as Ian was alluding to before, if you can get a leader who's also a good manager, or a manager who's also a good leader, fantastic, brilliant. They're both needed.
Don't know many of those people. I could count on one hand the number of people I know who are good at both.
Yeah, they're both important.
That's very pointy, and picking up on what Catherine said too, it just reminds me of an old saying of a very successful man who's happened to be my dad. He's never said to me at his knee, never promote your best salesman to be your sales manager. You lose your best salesman and you get a second-rate manager.
Correct.
How many times does that happen in so many
industries
fields
and professions? It happens in accounting firms, it happens in doctors' practices, it happens across the whole human experience.
Yeah, we don't promote the subject matter expert. Reward them.
Right, absolutely.
Reward them, include them in conversations, and include them in the access to the leadership team in the planning and the thinking stage, and reward them for their expertise. But for God's sake, don't give them people to look after, because they'll hurt them.
one of the things I had a flash of memory, and this is fear, habits, and ignorance, David. But as David knows, Catherine knows as well, I was the national president of the Professional Speakers Association of Australia for a while.
Yep.
And
I remember.
one of the things that I learned, because I was also the chairman of the board, therefore, of the organisation, and had to chair the board meetings. And one of the things that I recall, and thankfully I had a couple of good people around me who saw my fear, habits, and ignorance. And what I used to do at suggestion of one, Helen McDonald, you may know her, I used to hand over the chairing of the meeting to her so that I could lead.
Yep.
Because chairing was often, was procedural stuff, and I used to get caught up in that and forgot about being the leader, because I can't do both. I'm not. I can lead, but I'm not a very good manager. And
Yep.
so it's an example, and there are lots. As I say, I know 5 people maybe who are good leaders and good managers.
I think I was the opposite. I think I was a very good manager who had to learn how to lead.
I was just going to say, Paul, you are the prime example, because when I first worked with you, you were a manager, and then the work was about becoming a leader. And it was hard to make the transition, as everyone I've ever worked with finds the transition. It's really hard.
I agree.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with the whole structure of, particularly in commerce, is that the only way to progress and be rewarded and to satisfy an ambition is to climb a leadership ladder. So you go from being on the floor to being, a 4-person, and then you become a line supervisor, and then a middle manager, and then a senior manager, and then a member of the executive team, and then finally one day, maybe if you're lucky, you're at the top of the pile. And that's the traditional approach. Well, I always advocate a binary approach, where if you it's a binary spiral. So you can be a technical or a subject matter expert, and progress with equal recognition, equal reward, equal incentives, and development opportunities, going up that subject matter side. You can also transition across into leadership, and vice versa, provided you actually have the aptitude and you actually demonstrate through your care and some other things that I'd like to discuss later on, that you can actually be an effective leader as well. And so it's not as though you're stuck in one stream or the other. You can transition across, provided you demonstrate you've got the goods and do the learning.
So we've got some real pillars here. Leadership's not management. We need both. They're both equally important. You can transition from being a manager to a leader, but there's obviously got to be training and coaching and mentoring and things involved. But other thoughts on what's coming up?
Can I just say, sorry.
Yep, Sally. Go ahead.
Just what about being a servant leader? Leadership by being a servant. So in terms of not necessarily being a leader at the top of the tree, or a recognized leader as such, but someone who leads as part of an organization, without necessarily having recognition, but actually leads through example or through doing all the things that you've talked about, David.
It's a role, Sally, isn't it? It's not a position, it's a role.
Yeah.
And anyone can play it.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's exactly right. And look, to be some of the most influential people in any organization is not the peak leader.
No.
I mean, I remember when I was first in command of a special investigation team in the military police. I was in command, but I wasn't the leader they followed. I was too immature. I was 2 years out of graduation. I had technical training, but I didn't have the leadership experience. And my warrant officer, he was the leader. and he mentored me and helped me to become a better leader. But during that phase, I was technically competent, but I wasn't the best leader. I was a growing leader, an emerging leader.
Thank God you were both able to work that out.
Oh, look, he was just a very impressive man. And as Sally really pointed out, he was a true servant leader. I mean, he did have rank. I mean, he was the second highest rank in a non-commissioned level, but he was really a father figure to everyone, but a caring, a true servant leader. Everyone else came first, and I mean, he wouldn't put himself in jeopardy, but everyone else came first.
I was very fortunate in the early days of my corporate career. I had a boss that saw something in me I didn't see in myself. It's fair to say I was an okay manager in those days. But he gave me a copy of Robert Greenleaf's book,
Servant Leadership. Yeah.
Written in 1960, I think, from memory.
Yep.
Well, it changed everything for me.
Yeah. And look, I think that the most where will you find the greatest group of servant leaders on the planet? And I look to people like Sally Paulin, who's a facilitator, a professional facilitator, and that's truly a servant leadership role in facilitation.
Some of the nurses and the doctors on the front line, who I see as the greatest examples of leadership.
Sure, absolutely.
The guy that's in Perth right now coordinating that bushfire response. No doubt there's
the incident controller. Yeah.
No doubt there's a few managers involved as well, which is needed. But
it's a whole team actually that does bushfire response.
It's recognising the role, isn't it? And the bushfire service, they do this pretty well from what I can tell.
Yeah. They're actually they're a volunteer group, most of them, particularly the bushfire, at least in WA, and the DFES, or the Department of Fire and Emergency Services professionals, if you like, the paid firefighters, are really mainly centred around the metropolitan areas and the built-up areas.
And if I'm not wrong, a lot of those people that are what we would call the technical experts, they know what's going on and what to do. They're not necessarily the people that would lead an operation.
Oh no, they have a proper structure, and they have station officers and the district officers, and they're all leadership roles of the firefighters. Then you have people who specialize, as you say, they specialize, but most of the volunteer bushfire fighters are really good at bushfire management, which is quite different to putting out a house fire. Very different. So, but the actual leadership functions within that structure do exist. In fact, I was heavily involved in leadership training for station officers and district officers for a number of years for DFES. But yeah, it's an interesting area. But look, leadership is everywhere, and not only in the designated role. I mean, anyone and everyone in the moment steps up into a position of leadership when the moment arises, when the need arises. I mean, people who step into in a traffic accident, for instance, before the AMBOs or the fire brigade or the police arrive, and they step into that role of managing the traffic and trying to keep everyone safe and clearing the road because it's too hazardous. Citizens do that all the time.
That's another one, isn't it? That's another great consistent truth. It's anyone and everyone stepping up in the moment.
Absolutely. And I think it's a human thing. It is a human thing. Some people do it as a livelihood, like myself, and some people do it because the situation demanded it. There was no one else to step up, or no one else did step up, so they did.
Well, sometimes they step up so quickly, nobody else needs to.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, they were alert, they were ready, they knew what to do, or they had a sense of knowing what to do.
My wife's like that with anyone who faints or falls over or whatever. She moves so quickly that she's the person in charge straight away and gets done. And, you know, sometimes I think, well, why didn't I do that? But she's just quicker than I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's horses for courses as well, you know,
Yes,
opportunity.
Yeah.
Opportunity.
That's
Yeah.
also another thing, sorry, about stepping in, about as a leader, learning not to step in all the time and learning to let other people become, do what they're good at.
That's a big
rather
one.
than just.
That's a big one, Sally. Yes, absolutely.
Very big one. Get out of the way. If it's working, if everything's working, get out of the way. Champion them, shout from the, help them to grow and help them to experience.
Simon Sinek is onto that in some of his books. One in particular is called "Real Leaders Eat Last," or that, I'm not too sure that's the exact title, but it's an interesting idea, and he talks about. There you go.
Good idea.
It's a wonderful sort of insight, military example, but really a wider view than that. You know, I always used to be fascinated when I was called into an organisation. Probably this is your case, David, as well. When you've probably been invited into the room by the leader, the guy that's got the title, and you get in the room and you work out very quickly that he or she's actually not the leader.
Absolutely, you could work out real quick who the leader is, really.
Which makes for a fascinating conversation, of course, because you've got one person who thinks they're in charge but actually isn't.
No, that's right. But they let the person think they are.
Or if they're really enlightened and wise, they would allow the dynamics to play themselves out, which is an even greater experience, of course. But
yeah.
So Simone, I'm fascinated. I see you. I know you always make a lot of notes, but you look like you're making copious notes today. What's coming up? There you go.
Drawings. Oh, excellent.
What's coming up for you, Simone?
I guess my biggest, I guess for me, the parts that I'm relating to is around, I guess, the three sort of problems three causes of leadership issues around fear, habits, and ignorance, and then the remedies for that. And I like that, I guess, a simple frame on that being three of the causes for issues with leadership, but then three of the remedies around courage or love, better practice, and continuous learning. So that for me is a really nice framing around it. But I guess particularly thinking, and I had this question sort of recently, is what do I see leadership being? And I really like the framing that you've put in there, David, around it's around engaging people, helping people to stay safe under pressure, give them hope for the future. Yep. I really like that. It's a really nice approach from a leadership perspective.
Yeah. Look, I mean, that's the main thing about leadership is about people, of course, and that people being at their best. And what can we do for them to help them be their best? And it's certainly not being driven by fear, which some leaders unfortunately think they have to do. And they themselves are the ones who are fearful. So they use fear. We just had an outgoing president that does that. In America, of course. There's a pretty reasonable example of somebody who is actually more fearful than he cares to admit. And where was the hope? Where were those? I mean, there's a really good example of, for me anyway, of how not to be a leader.
Wouldn't get any argument from me.
No, but I'd rather stay on the positive side of things. And I think that one of the things that really, when I was thinking about this conversation today, the most important thing at the end of the day that a leader has to be able to earn and maintain is trust. It is the singularity, if you like, of that particular aspect. Without that, there is no point in being a leader. There's no point in leading.
That's another one of the consistent truths, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
You probably agree, David and others, but once upon a time it used to be that knowledge was power. I think the shift happened some time ago that trust is power.
Yeah, I think shared knowledge is power. It's like the love of money. It's like money is the root of all evil. No, that's not right. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil.
Yes.
So the same thing with knowledge. I think knowledge shared is certainly powerful. Knowledge kept inside your own cranium is certainly not power.
If you look over the ages, though, we're losing the capacity to share knowledge because, the old now, and they're seen as that rather than a font of knowledge for the young ones. So there's a disconnect now. So the knowledge that our grandparents had perhaps isn't being handed down the way it used to be. So we're losing that thread of knowledge, and it's such a shame because now anything that's old is sort of thrown out the door as being irrelevant. It's a bit like history. People don't want to understand what history is about. It's not in vogue to talk about what was, but only what they have now. It's a very materialistic society we have. So shared knowledge is power. Perhaps that's a very strong statement, but it's a pity that it's not happening the way it used to. Does that make sense?
I do see opportunities and things happening, though, Catherine. I think I'm with you on as a general statement, but I do see, shifts. For example, there's a lot of wise people paying attention to Aboriginal culture right at the moment, and how collective wisdom works. I'm part of a global group of people. We had our meeting this morning online, for example. There's about 100 of us who meet regularly, and there is a collective wisdom that's shared from the older people. I mean, I think I'm the oldest person in the group, but the youngest person is in their 20s.
Right.
And there's a great sharing of knowledge. So
that's beautiful. That's wonderful.
I see, we talk about the technical term apparently is reverse mentoring, but whatever that might mean, there's an acceptance that everyone in the room has their own wisdom. And one of the objectives is to bring that wisdom to the table, and it'll be honored wherever it comes from. And so I'm seeing that. I mean, one of the books I highly recommend is the book called Dark Emu, which tells the truth about what happened to the Aborigines. Whereas that's not what's taught in schools.
No.
But there's an awakening around that kind of thing. So although I hear what you're saying, I'm seeing examples. And I think too, what we're doing here is having a conversation that matters.
Yeah.
And we're here because we want to have conversations that matter, and we want to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think the other comment that you made as well, that trust is power. I think trust certainly has actually always been powerful. Trust is something we must have. We must have that trust in our leaders. We must have trust in ourselves and trust in each other.
I shared with
our leaders.
I shared with my Heart Leadership group, of which Simone and Paul are members. We've just started looking at the Alderman Trust Barometer just recently, and it's interesting how trust has declined for political, religious, government leaders,
Certainly
but it's increased for medium level leaders. so that the boss, the employer, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for leaders, because now the younger generation, they want to be able to trust their immediate leader.
Absolutely.
So it's a wonderful opportunity, I think.
Look, the opportunities are boundless. There's no doubt about that. One of the things that I find really interesting is asking people, when I ask people, so you do believe in trust and you believe the need to earn it and to keep it. So how do you do that? And then I really love listening to the broad spectrum of answers. It's just it's quite interesting to see what people think in terms of how does one earn and then keep trust. And so I came up listening to people, my own practices, but certainly listening to others and looking at leaders that I follow and trust. I think I've come up with a formula.
Ah, so you're going to share that with us, hopefully?
No, of course I have. Knowledge is power, remember? No, absolutely. And in fact, I do it in a visual and a body embodiment way, and I offer it as an awareness mantra that you could create yourself for yourself as a leader. And I say that there are, use this hand because you guys, I can't see this. You've got these images on the hand. So there are 5 components, and they're the 5 C's of trust. And the first one represented by your thumb, and that is consistency. To be consistently consistent, if you like, but certainly consistent in regards to the delivery of your care for your people. And I don't mean and being caring for your people, certainly, as you would know, but many people think, oh, that means you're being weak, you're giving in, you're letting them get away with stuff. Not at all, but you do care for them. The second component is being candid, which is really truth-telling, to not gild the lily, to not use marketing spin on things, but tell it how it is. And that even means if you stuff up, if you, the leader, make a mistake, admit to it.
That was the Biden statement, basically.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
exactly.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next one is to be competent, not to be the subject matter expert necessarily, but to have enough competency to know what the standards are and how to maintain them and how to access the expertise when it's needed, and to have enough competency to know the difference between this person's the right subject matter expert and we need that person on the team. That kind of competency. And the final one is courage. The courage to not be overcome by our own fears or by the fears of our people, but the courage to press on in the face of difficulty and challenge, look for a solution, the courage to live by our values rather than surrender to fear, the courage to go where no one else has gone before, the courage to try new things, to experiment, the courage to say no, we're not going to do that for these valuable reasons, these value-based reasons.
I only got 4, David. I must have missed one. I got consistency, candid, competent, courage. Did I miss one?
Care, the first one.
Care. We started with care, then consistency. There you go.
Yes. No, we started with consistency, care, competence, courage, and candid. Well, I had candid. I always get the order wrong, but
a wonderful 5, nevertheless.
Yeah, and the thing to do then is this: to ask continuously as a leader, ask yourself this question: am I being caring? Am I being candid? Am I being competent? Am I being courageous? And it's almost like an awareness mantra that you can say to yourself to keep yourself and your leadership on track, because those are the components that endear trust and maintain trust.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful.
And so and then as a leader, you're checking yourself all the time. Am I being caring? Am I being candid? Am I being competent? You know, where's my courage? And so, but consistently. The overriding one is to be consistent in all those four things.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? I love the five, and that they are like a look in the mirror trust check of yourself, because obviously in order to endear trust in others, you've got to be trustworthy, and these are good pointers.
Yeah, and give people the opportunity to demonstrate themselves too, you know, that they too are trustworthy. To give trust is one of the first steps in earning trust.
Candid's a big one. I used to be referred to once upon a time as the connoisseur of candor, and what I discovered was I was actually blunt. I wasn't candid.
Yeah, and that's a really if you combine care and candid, then you get it.
I added compassion and being conviviality.
Yeah, well, compassion and care to me are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
and love.
It made all the difference, because I was a big fan of the Pixar people, where candor is why the reason they make such great films is their candor process.
Yeah. Now, one of the big determinants these days, and it's being measured now, and there's a lot of evidence coming up about it. And I'm trying to remember the name of the lady that pioneered it, but it's psychological safety, and that people have the psychological safety to be able to speak up, to call out those things that need to be called out, to address the elephant in the room, to challenge the sacred cows. And for a leader to be able to encourage that is a very strong signal that that leader has earned trust.
And this is where a lot of managers fail, because they have these conflabs, they have a conference, and they say to everybody, this is a very safe environment, you can say whatever you like, it's Chatham House rules, it won't go any further, be candid, and then they get shafted.
Yeah, or they don't necessarily get shafted, they get argued against. The people start defending.
After the fact, it hasn't stayed in the room, and the manager thinks, is that what they really think? Got to get rid of them before they cause any trouble.
I think it's Amy. I think it's Amy Edmondson, who's the creator of this concept of psychological safety. If I'm not wrong, I think it's Amy Edmondson.
Great concept.
It is. That's right, Amy. Yeah.
Here in Australia, we have a lady who is a known guru, and her name will come to me. You know her very well, David. Her name will come to me in a moment as well. Sandy Givens.
Oh, Sandy, yeah, Sandy Givens. Yep.
She is Melbourne based, and this is her field of expertise.
Yeah, look, it's a crucial thing, and that's where if the leader has the courage, the better practice, and the learning attitude to encourage psychological safety, those 5 components of trust you'll find are being honoured.
Google, of course, did a study of all of this, and that's documented. You can find that on the web if you search for it. They did a study of how it all works, because it's an interesting thing, isn't it? And Simon Sinek, Simone, he talks about this as well in the book that you've got. People want to feel safe.
Yeah.
And when they feel safe, they perform at their best.
They do, and you can rely on their word.
Hold on.
But I find that that's one of the key things when I'm dealing with this aspect of work that I do, that is to help resolve the difficult people issues in the business. And it is really about discovering why they're difficult, and always there's been a breach of trust somewhere along the line, to the point where people have been hurt, whether it be physically or psychologically, doesn't matter. And they've been let down. And so that's their reason for being difficult. It's more of a defense mechanism than anything else.
It's one of the great tragedies, isn't it? That's we see this kind of thing. It's at the height of, domestic violence. This is at the crutch of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
domestic violence, which can be very much a psychological thing, not just a physical thing, sometimes more damaging than the physical.
But it's a betrayal of trust is where it seems to center.
It's down to that. It's down to trust.
I'm out of this area now, but I used to work many years ago with young people, violent young men.
Yep.
Also with suicide tendencies, a lot of them, and that was also always a central issue. There was a betrayal of trust somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talking about habits, when it got triggered, they became violent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and the work was all about trying to find out and help people to identify the trigger and behave differently.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I find that actually undermines leadership and undermines leadership's attempts to move forward, to progress, is an assumption that the entire leadership cohort is aligned. There is an assumption normally that, yeah, we're in the leadership team, so we're all aligned, we're on the same page. And then when you test it, they get a shock that they're not aligned, and the lack of that alignment, or the incorrect assumption that they are aligned, actually is an unintended abrasion on trust.
Yes.
Because people are pulling in different directions because they've got different meanings for a particular word or a particular value or a particular goal. They've got a different meaning to it.
That was where David, my model, the shared view model, the 7 areas of shared view, that's where it came from.
Right.
It was originally created because every leadership team I went to see in the early 90s, when I first created the model, thought they were aligned and weren't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the model was, created to sort of help that.
To get that alignment.
Get that alignment, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that is that becomes an unintentional strain on trust.
Yeah, and I think the key word there's unintentional.
Yes, it's unintentional. So the fact that the leadership isn't actually aligned erodes trust unintentionally, because there's different meanings that are given to different ideas, and they proceed in a different direction, and people then, why are you doing that? We should be doing this, and straight away, and then there's a defense mechanism kicks in. Well, it's because that's what it means, and no, then we don't agree with that, and no, you didn't agree to this. Boom. I mean, the other thing that I think really, and it's something a bit of a barrow that I push, is that we use this word expectation, setting expectations, and I expect this, we expect that, the company expects this, and meeting expectations and all of those. And they keep on using this phrase expectation, or the word, and too often it's a one-way journey. And what I prefer people to actually live is to change the word from expectation to agreement. In other words, we've actually had a conversation about this, and we've reached agreement on this matter. And now it's a matter of honouring our agreement.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's the same with shared view. It's all about you've got your view, I've got mine, but the one that matters is ours.
Yeah, the one that we agree to.
The one we agree to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we hold
Gonna say
ourselves.
shared expectation.
Say again?
I was going to say shared expectation.
Shared expectations. Yeah. Yeah, that works. But too often we have a leader saying, I expect this from you. And it would be much better for the leader to arrive at a position. Look, we agreed that this was going to be the way we go about it. Can you help me understand why that's not happening right now? Much better than the statement, I expected you to do this. Why not?
It's a different kind of question that the real leader can ask when there's a shared agreement, isn't it? Because it's simply, I mean, the first question I always ask, and this is how I help my people I work with, the first question I ask is what happened? Whereas the pathological answer is who did it?
Yeah, absolutely. Who's to blame?
Who's to blame? Who did this?
Whereas that's the media approach. That's the media.
Yeah, that's the media approach. Whereas the real question is what happened.
Yeah, but I've seen that in big corporate where something's gone wrong, and the immediate focus is find out who we can blame so that they can take the fall for this.
Yeah. And that's and they're defending themselves, of course. Yeah. Or who can we put the blame on? Away from me.
It's like there's an absolute need for someone to be able to prove that they've taken action and against whoever was deemed to be the person responsible.
Yeah, it's so typical, isn't it, of lots of our culture on the wrong side. What we're talking about, of course, is the right side, as in best practice, better practice.
Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, that's one of the things that really got me about the Brereton report on the SAS and the commandos. And the SAS is a client of mine, and I was gutted when the Brereton report basically pointed the finger at the operators, and with no accountability at the officer corps.
Yeah.
And I find that a real shame in leadership when leadership doesn't take accountability for the actions of the team. And they'll
that's being role modeled. That's being role modeled everywhere, though. And what we're trying to say is, because that's Morrison Kelly.
Yeah.
That's it's gives the wrong message.
Totally wrong message. And the reality is that we delegate authority and we delegate responsibility. We never delegate accountability. And that's
the whole concept of ministerial responsibility is out the window.
Unfortunately, at the federal level, we have a government that won't allow any scrutiny.
True.
And whereas at the state level, we appear to have a different thing going on.
I don't know if Mr. Andrews thinks he has a lot of scrutiny.
Well, I mean, it's just one of those issues, isn't it? I mean, to us in Victoria, speaking for the two of us online that are Victorian, we've felt that he showed great leadership, and that he withstood the scrutiny.
Yeah, it was just a shame through that whole hotel quarantine debacle that nobody could remember who was in charge.
Yeah, no one took responsibility there. No one.
Which is, I mean, I think that's an indictment on the Premier too. But I think he, it's just one of those things that I think where it's easy to see non-leadership. We think it's harder to see good leadership, and yet I think we've demonstrated this afternoon that here we are sort of 15 minutes away from our time, and what we've seen, I think quite quickly and quite amazingly, is actually there is a lot of good leadership around.
There is, and one of the things that I'd like to really point out in these times that we're facing right now of the volatility, the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, chaos, ambiguity, or complexity, and disruption. We're looking at leaders who are in a crisis scenario, and I've never been in a crisis situation. I've been in hundreds of them where everything went perfectly.
True.
You know, and we've got to appreciate that. There are too many hounds calling for blood when a leader makes an honest error.
Yeah.
Or an error made out of, this is new, we haven't done this before. We're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, you know, we'll try something different, we'll move.
Which is why I think that the political leaders have trouble admitting that they made an error or a mistake.
Yeah, but that leads them down the path of cover-up.
Of course.
And that often is worse than the crime itself.
Yeah, that comes back to trust, what we were talking about before, because I agree with Ian. I think Andrew's, on the surface, was handling himself admirably and transparently and confidently and all of the above, probably demonstrating the 5 C's there. And where it seemed to fall apart for them was when that one aspect of the response didn't work. Nobody would put their hand up and say, I was responsible for that. And then obviously someone did take the fall, whether that was the right person or not.
I think one of the problems is that we're actually, if he turned around and said, I'm actually accountable for what happened, the people who were responsible and had the authority made some errors, but I'm accountable.
He did say
that. We're
that.
going to learn from that.
He did say that.
And so the clarity, we can't confuse responsibility with accountability.
Gladys said something similar too, and which deflated the issue significantly. I forget what the issue was, but it's it.
Yeah, I think that sort of the bottom line here is that you know, one of the issues is direction, and there's talk about normal or return to normal. It's the last thing I want, because normal wasn't working even before the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw a wonderful thing this morning, comes from Whoopi Goldberg. She said, normal is a setting on your washing machine. It's not something that not something we should have in the leadership conversation. I think that's it's a wonderful line, isn't it?
It's going to tickle it all day.
Normal's in the washing machine. Yeah.
So
have a look at the washing machine.
So where are we at, folks? What do we? I want to give David the last word shortly, but before that, what are our takeaways here? I think it's been a wonderful conversation, David. I thank you for bringing your heart and soul and your mind to our time together. But we'll give you the last word shortly. But what's the takeaways, folks?
Well, I love the 5 C's. I've just been on the phone to my publishers. There's a book soon on that. No, that was brilliant. I've written it all down. It's great.
Cool.
Brilliant.
That's really cool.
So have I. I loved the 5 C's as well. And I also loved, I guess, the assumptions in terms of, from a leadership perspective, assuming that we're all aligned is often incorrect. And that then puts the unintentional strain on the trust as such.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that phrase, abrasion of trust. Unintentional abrasion of trust. That's just so powerful. If I may very quickly share, one of the things I've said to my children in their growth was growing up was that there are more good people in the world than not. If that wasn't the case, society couldn't work. But many of them have to be encouraged to be a little bit better than what they are, and that includes you and me. And I've got that from this conversation quite clearly, is that there's some fabulous things to learn from you, David, and Ian, you've been fabulous as well. But to actually pull it all together is that, there's a group of, intelligent people here. Often we need to be reminded of things that we we kind of knew or did know, but haven't thought about it deeply enough. So thank you.
Yeah, cool.
I think it's a wonderful insight, Jonathan, and how good it would have been to been your children.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they always agreed with that, but
No, but I mean, there's the thing, isn't it? It's we get to see. I have a 47-year-old son who is now, you know, a bigwig in the corporate world, as it were, and it's kind of a great pleasure to see him succeeding in a world where I once was. Probably doing a lot better job than me.
Well, I think what we've given our children, and yours would have been included in this, is a better education than what we had. And I'm not, you know, it's changed and there are criticisms of it. But I think through that sort of 50s, 60s, 70s period, there was something of a golden moment before we didn't lose all the old stuff and we weren't too clouded by all the new stuff. And we came through and got a really good grounding. And if we can pass that on to our children, we're better off than most.
I think that's, we've lost Simone and Sally. I'm not too sure what happened there, but
No.
Anyway, I think these are great lessons. Catherine, what's your takeaway?
Well, look, I've worked with management all my career, and CEOs, all sorts of managers, and the level of leadership is a lot to be desired. But I can see now how that came about, because you've dissected it down to a more basic, like leadership is to take accountability for a team's actions. How often do they do it? And when you're working with executives, some of them are very good, but the leadership is so important. To give value to, like, they're supposed to create opportunities for staff to get on in their careers, and often it's not done. There's a disconnect, and it would be great to work some way to making that a better working relationship, because people who support others are there because they want to be, usually they want to excel, but they're always being pushed back down because there is no leadership. How on earth, if David knew how to fix that at the top, I think there'd be a lot more satisfaction in the roles that people have. And also with managers. I mean, I work with 2 micromanagers. They really are very, very difficult to work with.
Yeah.
But if they could value the support that they're getting through a strong leadership focus, how good would that be?
Yes.
You know,
one of the things that I've, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
One of the things that I'm concerned about, deeply concerned about, in fact, is that senior leaders, certainly at the general manager and then the C-suite, if you like, and company directors,
yep,
seem to have put a hold on their learning. And they expect everyone beneath them to do the learning and to do the training and to develop. And they say, I've already done that. And I've already done this and I've done that and I don't need any more. And when I say, well, if you've got all that expertise, how come you've got these problems? And they go silent.
King hit, David.
They go silent. And so it is a problem. It is a real problem. And I see the problem significantly in the state level of government. I don't know so much about federal, but I'll assume that it's similar, and certainly at local government level, but too often in commerce as well. We see senior executives who have stopped learning, and all they're doing now is regurgitating the past. And
for some of them, that passes a very long time ago.
Exactly, and it's a real problem particularly with young people coming on who actually have some ideas that there are new ways and there are better ways and there's more technology that we can use when we could be, all of those issues. And I think and it sort of leads me to realize that one of the other constants and consistent truths about leadership that works is that the leader is a lifelong learner. And that's the saying that I know many of our people in our field do bang that drum, but it's so true.
Yeah, I think it's
Glenn
absolutely true.
Capelli is a major advocate for it, but we have to be lifelong learners, and including not just technical stuff, but about leadership. You know, there are, you know, nearly 8 billion people on the planet. And until I know each one of those 8 billion people and how they tick and what makes them tick, I'm not done learning.
No, I think that's
Bar high, David. Set the bar high.
and I think it's also, I mean, this is a 1970s statement, but it was by Alvin Toffler, who was a futurist back then. You know, he said that the illiterate of the future will be those that have not learned, relearned, or unlearned.
Absolutely.
And that's a 50-year-old statement. I mean, I hear some of the things that some of the politicians say, and what I think is, I heard my father and my grandfathers talking like that in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've got the ideological positioning of a lot of people is very old.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with politics, unfortunately, no matter what side it is that politics isn't too much about emotion, not enough about facts.
Good on you.
The climate change probably is the thing. You know, I don't understand why politicians think that they know everything. Their job is to learn from the people that do, and do things that act on the people that do. But they seem to have this idea that they actually have the knowledge, and clearly by their actions they don't.
Yeah.
And so this is very question about, and we were talking about knowledge earlier, is that because there's so much information available through the internet today, intentionally or subconsciously, we will search out things that support our current view.
Yes.
The algorithms work that way, Jonathan.
Collude with that.
Yeah.
And it's confirmation bias.
Forces people into their positions far more quickly than perhaps previous education did.
I think that's true. I think that's very true. I mean, I try to come at things from an egalitarian positioning.
Yep.
And that is that, you know, we've got inequality everywhere. Leadership is about solving that. And I think one of the challenges with leaders that you're talking about, Catherine, and other people, is they see themselves as being superior to everyone else. They haven't learned, that their learning is very old. I'm thinking of a guy I worked with not so long ago who was at the time the CEO of the organization. They've since gone bankrupt, but he hadn't moved from his early days. He was still trying to operate as if it was 1970.
Yeah.
Of course, that's why they disappeared.
Absolutely.
But the good news is that I'm sure this is the case for you, David. In the time we've been involved in leadership development, there's a lot more people, a lot more lifelong learners than there seemed to be then. I don't know whether that's statistically true.
I'm pretty positive about it. I think that people are getting it. People are shifting. People are actually waking up in that sense. The fact that I haven't seen the conversation about leadership diminish. I have seen it. I'm seeing it getting more intense, but I'm also seeing some good stuff coming out of it. Some people stepping up. Some wonderful things happening.
Yeah, me too. I'm encouraged by the various conversations, and I'm encouraged that we've had this one, David, and I thank you once again, and thank you, Catherine and Jonathan and Paul and Simone and Sally, who were with us. But Sally, I got a note from Sally just a little while ago to say her internet connection dropped out. I think the same thing might have happened to Simone. So But just before we give the last word to David, just to let you know that next time Simone is actually leading us. We're talking about limiting belief systems and what to do about them with Simone next time. So
I look forward to that.
Look forward to seeing you then. But David, as is our practice here, before I close off the recording, we're happy to hang around afterwards, but we'll give you the last word.
Okay. Really, to me, leadership is a lifelong pursuit for anyone who wants to make a difference and to be of value. And it is about serving. It is about helping. It's not about perks or privilege. It's about service and helping, really. And really, that means that we've got a lot to learn. I mean, I've been a leader officially, I suppose, since I was 20, and that makes me
only 10 years.
Yeah, 52 years of being involved in the topic, and most of that time as a practitioner, and certainly always as a student, and I remain a student. And I certainly I love the topic. It's wonderful to see people get it and then apply it. That's just superb. It's a joy. And so the more we can, and we don't have to be in a particular position in order to experience and deliver leadership. We just do it from wherever we are. It's a state of being, really. And I always say, well, think about those 5 things. No matter who you are, you be consistently caring, consistently candid, consistently competent, and consistently courageous. And no matter where you are, you'll be a leader.
Wonderfully said. Thank you all.